Hello everyone. It is a great pleasure for me to speak to you today. Although I apologize, it is not live. I live in a small hometown in the southernmost part of the country of the Philippines, where power and internet connection is quite unreliable. So I requested Manuel if I can just record my presentation to you. Uh, my name is Laila Rispens Noel, and in 1979, I was granted a scholarship from the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs to study in the country. And because of fate, I met my husband there and stayed in the Netherlands for 32 years. In 2009, we went to Hong Kong when his company asked him to set up the Asia Pacific region, the office for servicing the Asia Pacific region. Um, and well, invited me to share my experience, my work with diasporas and development agency. I worked for 8 years with Oxfam Novi, uh, Oxfam Netherlands, as this is officially called now. And my main task at the time is to engage the migrants in the Netherlands in the activities of Oxfam Novi, particularly in development cooperation. So I applied, and I was very lucky. I was hired, and the first few months that I was hired, I was asking myself what I'm going to do in this office, and how I would engage the migrants. But being my migrant himself, I was already actively involved in a Filipino lead activities in the Netherlands ever since that we were under martial law in the year 1970s and through the 80s when EDSA revolution took place, and then after that when there was a war in Mindanao, we were engaged in conducting conferences, expert meeting, and different activities to encourage various groups in Mindanao to come together and have in the peace negotiation table. So we were doing various things, and we were also actively involved at that time in granting the Filipinos dual citizenship. Those Filipinos who are abroad, we campaign for the passage of the bill that would allow the Filipinos to retain their citizenship and to be allowed to vote. So we successfully did that no, as a Filipino diasporans. So back to Oxfam Novib. So I was asking myself what I'm going to do, and then migrants in the Netherlands are from various background. There are Sudanese, there were North and South Sudan, Congo, Benin, and Ghana, Nigeria. We are from Ecuador, and several other countries is Philippines, Bangladesh. This is a mixed group, mixed background, mixed emotional baggage, and different wishes and aspirations, legitimate as they are. But the first thing I was thinking is that if I work in this big company, I should have the support of the people, especially the key people, in implementing my program. So I talked to the heads of the department, especially the country representatives, where most of the migrants coming from, for example, from Ghana, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Philippines, and all other counters where Oxfam Novib is active. The first thing I should do is to meet their desk officers. And then I wrote some simple scoping studies. Some of them are cut and paste actually, just to gather some data to impress on my colleagues in terms of the status of the migrants and how it can be actively involved in our in development cooperation activities. So after that, I called for a meeting, a kind of a workshop. I give a presentation, ask them to react on the paper if they have something to add, etc., etc. And it was, fortunately, it was positively accepted. Some are eager, some were eager, some are not so, and the others are just wait and see. But for me it was good enough. So why did I do it? Because I have to do it because I know big agencies like Oxfam Novib, they work with sort of strategic plan, 3 years, 5 years, and based on that strategic plan, they would the officers, the staff will write their own activities so that those activities would lead to the achievement of the strategic goals of Oxfam Novib. So what I have in my mind is to mainstream migration and development wherever there are migrants, for example, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and Benin. I would like that in the strategic plan of the country representative, it will mention about migration and development and the Ghanaians community, for instance, the Nigerian communities. Because if it is mentioned there, now I have the right or the mandate to ask the desk officers, what are your plans with the migrants? Something like that. But more strategic thinking is that once migration development is mainstream in OVIB strategic plan, I will be able to ask for funding. Funding is very important to be able to accomplish your plans. So that's how I did it. First, internally, I try to work with Innovib, get that trust and support from key people, and get the funding that I needed to be able to plan my activities. And in 1 year time, I got all those things. So I was able to make more concrete plans. But working there at the time, I know I was also limited in terms of skills, knowledge, and networks to be able to make my activities more effective. So I started reading about the possible attending possible conferences which I could attend so that I can hear new things to guide me and then probably meet some people. And in 2003, if I am not mistaken, during the first global conference on remittances, that was the start when the first international conference I ever attended where remittances and migration and development were discussed in London. And it was that time that I met Dr. Manuel Orozco, and I was really was really impressed by his presentation, and I become an avid follower of Manuel, trying to contact him, ask questions, and I was so surprised that he answered my email queries, etc., etc. And so it dawned on me that the more that I engage people, the more that we can strengthen our network. So I organized the first expert meeting in the Netherlands where migrants leaders, diaspora leaders, and people in academia and in policy making. I invited them together with representatives from Oxfam Novib and discuss about the links between migration and development. And that was a kind of my roadmap in the next succeeding years in implementing the program, the migration development program of Oxfam Novib. I was fortunate, I said, because I get the funding from Oxfam also uh, to be able to engage the migrants in development cooperation. But the more I talk to them, the more I realize that it is frustrating to see for example, representatives from Ghana or representatives from Congo, Benin would meet the country representatives of Oxfam Novib, and then the result of the meeting was not positive. And then I asked the country representatives, why is it that you were not able to cooperate with them? And then the answer was, well, the Dutch are always very candid and straight to the point. That is, Laila, how can I work with people who don't know the difference between outcome and output, between objective and activities and all those, development jargons that we are talking about inside our office. And so I said, well, in that case, I should do more to be able, the migrant leaders, uh, meaningfully negotiate with the policymakers, with development agencies in equal power, and knowledge is power. So I launched the capacity building program where the migrant leaders would learn about how to prepare winnable project proposals, how to prepare a logical framework, and all other topics that relevant that are being used by the development agencies. My wish at the time is that when they start talking with Oxfam representatives, etc., at least they are talking on the same terminologies. They understand the same terminologies, and that is the way for small steps towards empowerment. I think it worked when it was quite quite successful to some. Of course, there are migrants who are not interested to learn, but those who are really willing to learn and use what they learn, they were able to improve a lot in their work. And then I noticed at that time, especially after the terrorist attack in New York, the prevailing anti-immigrant sentiments is growing in the Netherlands and other parts in Europe. That was very challenging for us during that time. And number two, because the migrants are at that time are accused of getting the work of the native, or even making use of the social benefits that make life of the native Dutch more difficult, and that's how they see the migrants. So with that growing anti-immigrant sentiment, and knowing that what I learned about remittances and its potentials to development in the countries of origin, I thought that instead of debating on the negative aspect on migration, we move forward to discuss the agenda on the positive side of migration. So we conducted seminars, expert meeting, forum about the role of migrants in development cooperation and in development of their countries of origin. I think we had an audience at the time, and I was very happy that Dutch development agency was very, very responsive, and especially in 2007, I remember the first global forum on migration and development was held, and it added the global awareness on the importance of migrants of the diasporas and their potential role in the development in the countries of origin and the host country. So, uh, but still, I noticed that the migrants at that time were very disunited. I mean, Nigerians hating were not Nigerian groups were not very friendly with this, and I mean, this has nothing to do with they don't like it, but they just have their own aspirations, they have their own plans, and each one would like to pursue their own plans. And because they are so disunited, the policymakers are hesitant to meet them, because if they like to talk to Ghana and they did not talk to Nigeria, then they have a problem. So I was encouraging the migrants in the Netherlands at that time to group together, to have one umbrella organization well, they can put their own aims and objectives, their own vision together, and then so that they can speak as one. So the Diaspora Forum for Development was established. I think in at the start, the founding members were about 40 organizations from various organizations, and the IFD becomes a speaking partner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and in many development agencies, because when you talk about when you talk with the FD, the policymakers will think that they work with an organization with large membership. So that was very strategic to have a federation. And then I encourage that country also, like the Ghanaian and the Filipinos, to have their own organization. Instead of one Filipino group will meet the other one, another Filipino group will meet. It was confusing situation. So I believe in a united front. uh, if you are from the same situation, you better group together and have one voice so you can speak louder. So that was the trend at that time, and it was successful, I think. And then the women migrants also, who are from fragile countries, whose countries are having problem, like Congo and Indonesia. They form their own federation, their own group, which is multicultural women peacemakers. And so there they can talk about the common interest and say how they can help their own countries of origin by working together. And because of that, that they gain more prominence, and the policymakers are treating them more equally, and the more they can get, they have access for funding. They have more access in funding, and that was very important. Um, the good news in that time, like in my work, I would say, was we were very happy that it's not only Oxfam Novi but also other development agencies were actively involved in supporting diaspora organizations. They provide funding, access to facilities, etc. In fact, now after just looking back, I just realized that we were really pampered at the time, because we were able to travel to different countries with in the program, linking and learning program, where a group of Netherlands would visit Mexico to study the Trust for Honor program. They go to Benin, they go to Indonesia, they go to Congo, represent to learn, That was unique at that time, and there was funding. But because of this, Oxfam Novib and other funding agencies set aside funding for diasporas who have projects in their countries of origin, and if they submit a project proposal and they met all the requirements, the funding agency will support a project in Ghana, for instance, or Nigeria, or in Kenya. That was working at that time. The bad news is, once this help uh, pulled out, uh, I mean, in 2009, when I left the country, that was also the time that the support was, they withdrew support to migrants, not because I think officially, not because they don't like it anymore, but because the funding agencies in the Netherlands were also under pressure in terms of getting funding from the Dutch government, and they prioritize the program, and unfortunately migration and development is not on top of the agenda of many many development agencies, and that is sad, that it was not sustained. So the bad news is, when this kind of help was pulled out, the diaspora also did not continue with their activities, except for some organizations which I'm really proud of, like here the Somali group. They became very successful, that today from a small diaspora-led organization, it become a respected non-governmental organization and already dealing, networking, or even get support and cooperation with large agencies like the Red Cross, the Save the Children Fund, and even Oxfam could not withdraw their support from here because they know it is working well. The same with Basog from Bangladesh group. But some other small time diaspora organizations, they just fade away. And I think that still holds true. That the fact that not all can survive, only those who are really persistent would be able to do it. So a question about how to make the diaspora more effective in development cooperation. Would development practitioners enhance the role of diasporas in development? Would they be given resources, for example, social inclusion or political rights? I think it goes with the time. It goes with the time. For instance, in my experience, between 2003 and 2009, there was full support for migrants in the Netherlands from the Dutch government and the development agencies. But time changed, time changed. They don't put migration development on top of the development agenda anymore. So what would the migrants do? For me, it depends on the migrants themselves. I mean, they can continue with their work and finding their own resources or stop because they don't have any more support from development practitioners. But there are some basic things that they should have. In countries like the Netherlands, for instance, it is very important if they are integrated. They acquire that citizenship, and now because they acquired that citizenship, they exercise rights like any other Dutch. And so they can use more resources, and social inclusion is also important. Although some are backward, but generally speaking, if one is cooperative, a migrant can be able to be successful in a country which provide them the right for citizenship. For example, in Canada and Netherlands, and in some parts in Europe, where after a certain period of time or after some requirements are met, they acquire the citizenship of their host country. And once you become, for example, in my case, in 1980 when I got married, at that time the law is very clear. By the time I got married, after the ceremony, I'm automatically become Dutch. But 5 years later, after you get married, you can only become Dutch after 3 years, and after you learn the Dutch language, integration program, etc. etc. In my case, at that time, I got married 1980. Whether I speak Dutch or I know Dutch culture or not, I become Dutch. That's that's it. That's it. And because I was granted that citizenship, I can find job right away and enjoy benefits, social benefits in the country, and it's different for the new migrants. And I mentioned earlier that we campaign for the uh, dual citizenship of the Filipinos living abroad, especially those who are qualified. We worked really for hard for this in the Congress, and we had a global campaign to pressure our policymakers to sign the bill, and we successfully launched the program. So Filipinos now can opt for dual citizenship, and we can make use of that power of the rights in the same way as the Filipinos. We can have the right to vote. We can vote either online or we go to the precincts, meaning we exercise the same rights. We exercise at the same time we retain our foreign citizenship that we acquired abroad. it is important. Why in this case? Because there are things that you can only accomplish if you have that right. Mm? I mean, we can campaign for the candidates that we think worth it for our country. But having a political right is not also 100% guaranteed that it will go in the right path. I mean, if in the case of the Philippines, for instance, you can agree or with me, but there are some groups that the overseas Filipinos were overwhelmingly supported to the present government, and while the other group said the present government is not good. So the majority of the Filipinos abroad who have the right to vote supported this president of ours at the moment. And if others think that he was not a good president, in their eyes is that the Filipinos, even if they have the right to vote or they have the political right, cannot always lead to, or is not a guarantee to lead to a better future in the country, because they help a person to win, which is how do you call that? I don't know how to say it in this forum. The president, which is not liked by some people, I would say, was not a good president. Just to make blunt about it. But that is the opinion of others. That's the opinion of others. So, having a political right can indeed help the country uh, to, to decide or to determine the future of the country because of their sheer number of the Filipinos. For instance, the Filipino vote, overseas vote, decided that the outcome of that election. If the outcome is good, if the right person is good, well, but if the one who won was not exactly what you think about it, then that political rights of the diaspora is still questionable. So I would say that you provide the social inclusion, you provide political rights, good, but still you have to continue the conscientization, maturing of political understanding on how important, for example, the vote, how important, how the overseas Filipinos should vote, especially if it will determine the outcome of the election. There are still some people who are very sad that how come that the overseas Filipinos supported the present president today. But if you ask the overseas Filipinos who voted for the president, they said it was the right decision that they made. So whatever you would think, whatever side you are, there will be a different opinion. But in my case, if you ask me personally, even if you have we are you are diasporas are beneficiaries of social inclusion or political rights, uh, it's still not enough, because there are many of my co Filipinos living abroad who are not actually making use of that right in a positive way. I can explain this better if it is face to face, and I can give example, but it is very difficult to say, especially in a situation that we have at the moment in the Philippines. So that was my experience in Europe, but my experience in Hong Kong was quite different. In terms of social condition, the domestic helpers in Hong Kong are more in a disadvantaged position because of the nature of their work. They work from Monday to Friday, sometimes from 10 to 12 hours. Unlike in the Netherlands, the migrants are not the migrants have some issues, but at least they are provided with something to be able to live with dignity. They don't work on Saturdays and Sundays unless they work in a shift system. They have everything. But in Hong Kong, in terms of development work, it's very difficult because one, there was no Oxfam, no WIB, no Cord Aid that would assist them. Everything is done by them. In the Netherlands, some of the migrants would even ask for funding to pay for the babysitter of their children while they are attending conferences or live in seminars. In Hong Kong, there's nothing about that. No group will provide them food. No agencies that will provide them a place where they can meet. So when I was there, I was actually conducting workshop near the fountain or near the railway station, anywhere we can find, because there was no resources for us to go to a place where, like in the Netherlands, you can sit and drink your coffee with table and a chair, very cozy. But in Hong Kong, we learned to do this. And then, in terms of food, everybody bring their own food. Because there was no funding agency that would provide them money for their lunch or for their snacks. So for me, the migrants in Hong Kong are more self-reliant than in the Netherlands. Having no money at all was not their issue. uh, when we plan for a workshop, they know that they will bring their own food, and they know that we will look for a space anywhere in the plaza, in the near the fountain, or wherever there is a space where we can sit down, and that's it. For the first time in my life, I conducted strategic planning workshop near the bridge, and without PowerPoint presentation, nothing, no tools at all. But we were able to manage it, and we were able to adapt it. So, in Hong Kong, I also found that you can help the country by by generating, mobilizing help from themselves. My during the earthquake in my hometown, for instance, in the province where I live, a lot of assistance were given, cash and in kind, from the migrants in Hong Kong and other countries, and they able to mobilize them without any funding agencies assisting them. So these people in Hong Kong cannot do not have any perspective to stay for good as permanent resident, and yet when it comes to disaster, despite their small salary, they were able to share the resources to us. And then they send us boxes, and the items are coming from the migrants themselves, from the domestic helpers. So that was a very interesting insight for me when I compare the situation in Europe and in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, because there's an absence of support, the migrants were able to do something on their own. In Europe, in the Netherlands specifically, they do something, but it was given that the funding agencies will support them. Now, my question also at the moment is that now that the support to diasporas are withdrawn, there's not anymore, what do they do? Unless you are like Hirda or Basog, that they were able really to move themselves to a position that they become recognized as trusted NGO, then they can get assistance. So it's very difficult. The development cooperation is really, it's innate. Uh, First, we have to rely on the interest and passion and dedication of the migrants themselves. They do things on their own, and then secure support from others as possible. They can do it, and then social inclusion for countries where this is possible to stay uh, as permanent citizen. I think it is very important and it's very useful because they are free to travel. They are free to travel. But in the case in Hong Kong, they are not. They are not. They don't, the basic law in Hong Kong that does not allow a group of people like the domestic helpers to secure permanent residence. So they have to think of the return and reintegration. But the engaging in development is still for me um, uh, is very tricky in the sense that it should come from the migrants themselves. It should come from the diaspora themselves, and all others we can support them with enabling the environment like social inclusion or providing them resources and the political rights, but they should be able to discern how to use it properly. Which is properly. And so, because of that experience that I have in Hong Kong and the last since 1920 and this 21, we cannot anymore conduct our executives course, which is 6 months, where we teach domestic helpers, migrant workers, Philippine migrant workers in leadership, financial literacy, and social entrepreneurship, and teach them how to prepare their return and reintegration. We were not able to do it last year, and this year we decided to publish a book. We published a book, and my idea at that time is there are many books written about the migrants, but very seldom that we have a book written by themselves. And it should not be too academic, and it's better it should be coming from their heart and candid and describe the stages of migration. So that's how we come out with the book, Diaspora Journey, stories of Philippine migration to Hong Kong, which is really interesting because Hong Kong was already a country of destination, even in the 19th century, for many Filipinos, musicians, and even our national heroes, who exiled during the Spanish colonial period. So that book is actually a manifestation of a candid manifestation of the state of mind of migrants at the time that they wrote it on, and by that time they think back about their why they go to Hong Kong. So we divided the book in different chapters that hopefully would describe the different stages of migration, like first, when did you decide to go abroad and why Hong Kong? Berto, what was your condition when we arrived in Hong Kong? The situation in the workplace. Three, what do they do during their free days? What do they do in preparation for their return? When one day they wanted to say, I want to go home for good. And then we also have a special chapter for professionals, where are also a good number in Hong Kong are professionals, what they have done so far, their challenges and their aspirations. And the last chapter is about some selected stories of successful migrants from Hong Kong who went home and now successfully running their businesses. So I hope that this book is so simple, 150 pages, and easy to learn, but there is a lot of it, the sentiments of the Filipino migrants in Hong Kong, and I'm sure Filipinos anywhere in the world would share the same sentiment, and ultimately other nationalities, there would be some similarities of the experience. I hope I covered some of the topics. Some may be vague or not, because it's also some time now that I left Netherlands, and my involvement at the moment while I'm still active with migration and development, but not as intense as before. My work is divided now by helping our indigenous peoples, especially the tribal women weavers and other thing. But I continue. I am back actually to the work I did in the 1970s when I conducted seminars for farmers, peasants group. And this time I am slowly again busy providing my time for the capacity building or peasant organizing by providing